My name is Elena Vance. I am 28 years old, and this is the story of how I dismantled an empire built on lies, using nothing but the truth they thought they had buried. The air in the dining room was thick with the scent of roasted lamb and betrayal. It was a Sunday, the kind of perfect, sun-drenched afternoon the Sterling family loved to showcase. A testament to their perfect lives, their perfect wealth, and their perfect, polished lies. My blood turned to ice as Isabella, my sister-in-law, slid each glossy photograph across the mahogany table. Her movements were slow, deliberate, a predator playing with its food. The snapshots showed me, head tilted, hand occasionally touching an arm, smiling and engaged with different men in sunlit cafes and quiet restaurants around the city. A sharp intake of breath from my mother-in-law, Catherine, filled the suddenly airless room. It was a masterful performance. "Look at these," Isabella said. Her voice dripped with a sweet, venomous concern as she turned to my husband, Marcus. While Marcus has been working himself to exhaustion for this family, Elena has been running around town with other men. She placed a proprietary hand on his shoulder, standing just a little too close. Across the table, Chloe, the woman he'd been sleeping with for the past 6 months, sat silently at his other side, playing the part of a concerned family friend. Her eyes, however, couldn't hide a flicker of triumph. Isabella's gaze met mine, gleaming with victory as she delivered what she thought was the final, killing blow. "Now, you don't have to feel guilty about Chloe, Marcus, and you definitely don't have to give Elena a single penny in the divorce. The family I had devoted 10 years of my life to, the family I had helped build from a struggling local business into a regional powerhouse, gathered around those photos like vultures circling a kill." Catherine, my mother-in-law, picked one up with trembling fingers. Her voice broke with practiced disappointment. "Elena, how could you? We welcomed you into our home. We treated you like a daughter." There was a time her words would have cut me to the bone. A time I would have crumbled, desperate for her approval. Now, I just observed her performance with a cool, clinical detachment. It was fascinating, really. The intricate dance of their deception. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Isabella demanded. One hand was propped on her hip, the other pointing dramatically at the evidence spread before us. I took a deliberately slow sip of water. My eyes moved across the table, cataloging their reactions. Marcus, my husband of 5 years, still wouldn't meet my gaze. His jaw was tight, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He was a portrait of a man torn between guilt and the relief of being given an easy way out. His parents looked appropriately devastated. Though I noticed his father, Richard, a man I had always respected, seemed more uncomfortable than truly angry. He kept glancing at the door, as if wishing he could escape. Isabella stood tall, radiating a smug, righteous fury. She was the architect of this moment, and she was savoring it. "Nice pictures," I said calmly. My voice was even, steady. It was the voice of a woman they had never met before. "The lighting is excellent. You must have paid your private investigator quite a lot." Isabella's triumphant smile faltered for a fraction of a second. This wasn't the tearful, hysterical denial she had scripted in her mind. "That's all you have to say," she snapped, her voice sharp. "You're not even going to deny it." I reached into my large, leather handbag. I felt the entire table tense. They were waiting for tears, for a desperate confession, for the emotional breakdown that would confirm their victory. Instead, I placed my sleek, black tablet on the table. Its screen was dark, reflecting the strained faces around me. Why would I deny it? My voice remained steady, cutting through the tension. "Those men are all divorce lawyers." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating thing, broken only by the distant chime of the grandfather clock in the hall. "What?" Isabella stuttered, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. I pointed to each photograph, my finger tapping the glossy surface with methodical precision. "That's Jonathan Reed, the best and most ruthless family lawyer in the state. This one here, that's Michael Chen. His firm specializes in cases involving infidelity and hidden assets. And this dinner meeting, that's with William Davenport. He's particularly skilled at handling high-conflict divorces where one party attempts to use fraudulent evidence." Isabella's face drained of all color. Marcus suddenly found his water glass the most fascinating object in the world. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth. I continued, my voice calm and clear. "You see, when I found the hotel receipts and the secret credit card statements 3 months ago, I decided to prepare myself." "Properly? You're lying?" Isabella whispered, but the uncertainty in her eyes betrayed her. "Am I?" I activated my tablet, The screen lit up, displaying a folder filled with scanned documents, emails, retainer agreements, signed contracts. The wonderful thing about legal consultations, I said, scrolling deliberately through the files, is that there is always a paper trail. I let them absorb the weight of what they were seeing. The months of careful planning. The sheer scale of my preparation. But that's not even the most interesting part. I added, finally looking directly at Marcus. His eyes, when they finally met mine, were wide with a dawning horror. "What do you mean?" Catherine's voice trembled. "Well," I said, leaning forward slightly. "During one of these many meetings, I learned something fascinating about recent property transfers within the Sterling family business. Lots of money and several properties changing hands. New shell companies being formed with unfamiliar names. I let the implications hang in the air, thick and poisonous." Richard, my father-in-law, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his face pale. Marcus frowned, turning to his father. "Dad, is that why you had me sign all those papers last month? You said it was just routine restructuring." I watched the gears turn in my husband's mind. The slow, agonizing realization dawned on his face. His family wasn't just covering for his affair. They were actively, systematically, and illegally hiding marital assets before the divorce they were planning to orchestrate. They were not just protecting him. They were planning to leave me with nothing. "Marcus, sweetheart, we were just protecting you," Catherine began, her voice pleading. "Actually," I cut her off, my tone sharp as glass, "you were committing felony fraud." I offered them a thin, cold smile. "And my legal team has documented every single transaction. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely powerless, where you felt like the game was rigged against you, and all you could do was play the hand you were dealt?" That was the moment I stopped playing their game and started playing my own. Isabella collapsed into a chair, the architect of this perfect trap, suddenly finding herself ensnared in a much larger, more dangerous one. "You knew," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You knew this whole time." I nodded, slowly gathering my belongings. "Next time you hire a private investigator." "Isabella," I said, my voice soft but carrying the weight of a final judgment, "make sure they're not working for both sides." I stood, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "Oh, and Marcus, your lawyer will be receiving the official paperwork tomorrow morning. You might want to read it carefully, especially the section detailing the penalties for conspiracy to commit fraud." I walked to the door, my heels striking the polished floor like a metronome, counting down the seconds of their old life. At the doorway, I turned back one last time to look at Isabella. "Thanks for the photos," I said. "They'll make excellent evidence." My blood was no longer ice, it was fire. My heels struck the marble floor like a metronome, a steady, rhythmic beat counting down the final seconds of their world as they knew it. Only when I reached the cool leather of my car, and the heavy door clicked shut, did I finally allow myself a small, private smile. They thought they had trapped me. They thought I was a naive girl they could discard like yesterday's news. They had no idea what was coming. The next few days unleashed a special kind of chaos. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Marcus's family. Threats mingled with tearful, desperate pleas. Isabella cycled between rage and panic. Her texts grew increasingly unhinged. "You can't do this to us. We're family," her latest message read. That word, family, lingered in my mind. They hadn't treated me like family when they were secretly plotting to leave me with nothing. They hadn't treated me like family when they sat there, watching my husband's mistress by his side. I archived her message without a response, and I focused on my preparations. Jonathan Reed's law office projected exactly the kind of power it intended. Gleaming wood, supple leather chairs, and an atmosphere of quiet, unshakable authority. This was my new home ground. I was reviewing the final documents in the conference room when they arrived. Marcus entered first with his lawyer, a man who looked flustered before the meeting even began. He was followed by Catherine and Richard. Isabella trailed behind them, attempting an air of confidence, but failing visibly. Her eyes were hollow. "Mrs. Vance." Jonathan greeted me with a professional nod. He did not call me Mrs. Sterling. The distinction was intentional. It was a statement. "Shall we begin?" I watched Marcus's expression as Jonathan methodically presented our evidence. He grew noticeably pale when we displayed the detailed timeline. Every suspicious property transfer, every hastily created shell company, every deliberate, fraudulent attempt to hide their money from me. Catherine clutched her husband's arm when Jonathan mentioned the very real possibility of criminal charges for fraud. "This is nonsense." Marcus's lawyer protested weakly. These were normal family business decisions. Were they? I asked, my voice cutting through his bluster. I slid a thick stack of documents across the polished table, because these records show my name was systematically removed from key family business assets exactly 3 months ago, which was, coincidentally, precisely when Marcus began his affair with Chloe. I let my eyes linger on him. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? Richard, the patriarch, shifted uncomfortably. He had always been the weakest link, a man terrified of public scandal. Now, Jonathan continued, his voice calm and commanding. We are prepared to be reasonable. Mrs. Vance helped build this family's success over 10 years. She simply wants what she is legally and morally entitled to. Entitled to. Isabella snapped. She's trying to ruin us. I turned to her, maintaining my composure. No, Isabella. I'm protecting what I helped create. I paused, letting the silence build. Would you like me to play the recording? Her face went white. David's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. You recorded us? No, I replied calmly. I didn't have to. Your mistress did. Jessica was quite helpful once. I showed her the proof that you were planning to discard her, too, as soon as you'd secured your assets. The room erupted. Catherine dissolved into theatrical sobs. Richard demanded to speak with his personal lawyer on the phone. Isabella screamed about betrayal, the irony apparently lost on her. Through it all, I sat quietly, watching my husband finally realize how thoroughly and how completely he had been outplayed. He had underestimated me. But worse, he had underestimated the woman he was cheating with. A fatal error. Here is what is going to happen. Jonathan spoke over the chaos, his voice like steel, commanding immediate silence. We have documented, irrefutable evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. We can pursue this criminally, which will be a very public, very messy affair for the Sterling family name. Or we can reach a reasonable settlement. Today. He placed a pen on the table. Your choice. Marcus's lawyer requested a moment with his clients. As they huddled in the corner, whispering frantically, I could see the fight draining from Marcus's body. He had always been arrogant, a man propped up by his family's name, utterly convinced of his own cleverness. But now, stripped of his power, he just looked hollowed out. Small. We will agree to fair terms. His lawyer finally announced, his voice heavy with defeat. Excellent. Jonathan smiled thinly. Ms. Vance has already outlined her requirements. He distributed copies of my settlement proposal. I had been thorough but not vindictive. I wanted what I had helped build. Nothing more, nothing less. This is outrageous, Catherine exclaimed, reading the numbers. But Richard placed a restraining hand on her arm. Sign it, Marcus, he said quietly, his voice raspy. We can't risk this getting out. As Marcus picked up the pen, his hand trembling slightly, Isabella made one last, desperate attempt. Wait! Those photos! She was meeting with men in public. She was flaunting it. I couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. Of course they were public, Isabella. I wanted you to see them. Every lunch, every coffee meeting, I knew you were having me followed. I just made sure your investigator captured exactly what I wanted you to see. The final realization that they had been puppets in my own play, that they had funded the very evidence that would bring them down, finally silenced them. One by one, the documents were signed. As Jonathan gathered the paperwork, I stood to leave. Elena? Marcus called out, his voice strange and unfamiliar. When did you become so calculating? I paused at the door, turning to look at him one last time. Not with anger, not with sadness, just with a quiet finality. I learned from the best, I said. Family taught me. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. As I walked out of that office, I felt lighter than I had in a decade. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about winning. It's about showing them they underestimated you all along. Outside, the city air felt crisp and clean. My phone buzzed. A message from Chloe. It's done. Thank you for showing me the truth about him. I smiled, remembering how easily my husband's mistress had become my greatest ally. His patterns of deception were his undoing. He made promises to her, just as he had to me, with no intention of keeping them. Sometimes, the strongest alliances are forged in the ruins of a common enemy. Driving home, I thought about family. Not the one that had betrayed me, but the one I would now build for myself, on my own terms, with my own rules. Pause for 4 seconds. 6 months after the settlement, I sat on the balcony of my new penthouse apartment, sipping coffee and watching the city awaken. Morning sunlight cast long shadows across my living room, highlighting the new life I had created for myself. My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe, of all people. We had maintained an unlikely, but genuine friendship. You won't believe who I just saw at Riverside Cafe. Isabella. She actually tried to pretend she didn't see me. I smiled. The Sterling family had unraveled after our final meeting. Their carefully constructed facade had cracked under the weight of their own schemes. Richard had retired early, claiming health issues, but the whispers at his precious country club told the real story. Catherine had thrown herself into charity work, a desperate attempt to launder their social standing. Isabella, perhaps, had faced the harshest reality. Her role in the fraud had cost her the executive position she so coveted. Last I heard, she was working as a junior accountant at a small, unknown firm. And Marcus, Laura, my closest friend, had given me the update over lunch last week, has been demoted. Apparently, the board wasn't thrilled about his business decisions during the divorce drama. After the settlement, I had used a portion of my funds to start a strategic consulting firm. I helped other women navigate complex divorces, protecting themselves from the very traps that had been set for me. It felt right. It felt like turning a scar into a shield for others. My phone rang. Jonathan Reed. Lena, he greeted warmly. Just wanted to let you know the last of the transfers are complete. Everything is officially settled. Thank you, Jonathan. For everything. You know, he said thoughtfully, in all my years of practicing law, I have never seen someone handle betrayal with such strategic precision. Have you ever considered a career change? I laughed, but his words resonated. In outmaneuvering the Sterlings, I had discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. Strength, cunning, and an ability to see the entire chessboard, not just the next move. Later that evening, as the sun set over the city, I raised a glass of wine. The family that had tried to destroy me had, in their arrogance, set me free. Their attempt to leave me with nothing had pushed me to become more than I had ever imagined. The doorbell rang. Chloe with a bottle of wine and a smile. Our monthly catch-up had become a tradition. To Karma, she said, raising her glass. David's dating someone new, by the way. Poor girl has no idea what she's getting into. Should we warn her? I asked, half joking. Chloe laughed. Something tells me she'll figure it out on her own. We shared a knowing look. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better, and watching the world balance itself out. As the city lights began to sparkle below, I felt a profound sense of peace. The family that had tried to write me off as knave had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. Never, ever underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. She just might gain the whole world.